while preparing for his State of the Union speech, which was scheduled for tonight. NBC White House correspondent Chris Wallace reports on the rest of the President's Day and reaction as the news spread throughout Washington.
The President was no different from any other American today, watching the tragic news on television. Late this afternoon, he addressed the nation about what he called a traumatic experience.
Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss.
Mr. Reagan talked directly to the school children who watched the launch, saying the future belongs not to the faint-hearted, but the brave. And he emphasized today's accident will not stop the space program.
We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here.
Vice President Bush and the acting head of NASA were sent to Cape Canaveral to talk to the families and launch an investigation. But officials said Mr. Reagan has full confidence in the space agency. The President was to make his State of the Union speech tonight and planned to go ahead even after the accident, saying, "You can't stop governing the nation." But congressional leaders told the White House there was no interest in politics tonight, so Mr. Reagan canceled.
Let us remember in silent prayer those who were involved in the spacecraft shuttle accident just a few minutes ago off Florida.
On Capitol Hill, the House met for a brief prayer and then adjourned. But members of Congress wanted to talk. Some had ridden the shuttle themselves, like Utah Senator Garn.
Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about it because these were my friends.
Former astronaut John Glenn spoke of the triumphs of the space program.
Sometimes, though, we aren't perfect. And then there's a tragedy that brings us back to our own human frailties.
Congressman in charge of shuttle funding said the program will go on, but only after a full investigation.
There may be delays that could go on for as much as a year with regard to future shuttle launches.
The President was going to mention the shuttle tonight in his State of the Union speech as an example of American progress. Instead, he had to deliver a eulogy to the Challenger crew, calling them pioneers on the last frontier. Chris Wallace, NBC News, at the White House.
This terrible event has touched the hearts of Americans all across the country, of course, and we'll have a report on how this nation reacted when we return. Destruction in the skies today, and they reacted with disbelief and sorrow.
There could have been a tearing when the rocket went into great acceleration, its fastest point.
The only thing I could think about with those kids in that auditorium and the trauma they must be going and what a shock it must be for them to watch something like that happen to their teacher. That's what I was thinking of.
Really makes you sick to your stomach is the only way that I can explain my feeling. I was sick to my stomach.
I was hurt. As an American, I was hurt. And I still feel it in my heart that we've had a great loss.
I felt like every one of them was my sons and daughters. I really did.
Triumph has marked and tragedy has marred America's space effort in the past. With each success, new heights were set. With each failure came a resolve to continue. And as NBC's Gary Cutley tells us now, the American spirit remains undaunted by the magnitude of even today's disaster.
From the moment the Wright brothers proved it could be done, challenging the law of gravity has captured the imagination and exacted a human price. The Hindenburg disaster came to symbolize that.
All the folks agree that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world.
Man was not meant to fly, skeptics said, but did. Was not meant to break the sound barrier, but did. Flew higher and faster until there was only space to conquer.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
The space program, too, began with failures, to some a warning that man had met his limit. But technology triumphed. John Glenn orbited the Earth and came home a hero. For behind the cold technology, it has always been the human spirit which has driven man into space. There were losses. 3 astronauts killed during a launch pad exercise in 1967. And there was the ultimate triumph.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And then there was today, an epitaph for 7 Americans, written large and hauntingly on a beautiful blue sky. Senator John Glenn has been there.
I guess in our human existence there is triumph and there is tragedy. And man tries many things. And we advance as a whole human race because we succeed most of the time. We make advances, whether it's in space or engineering or health or medical things. Sometimes, though, we aren't perfect. And then there's a tragedy that brings us back to our own human frailties.
But as we contemplate our frailty, we have also been fascinated by pictures from Uranus and its moons 2 billion miles away. Pictures from Voyager showing new worlds to discover and explore. Can there be any doubt that one day, despite the risk, man will follow? Garrick Utley, NBC News.
We'll have a special report on this Challenger tragedy tonight on NBC at 10, 9 Central Time. Personal thoughts. As we try, all of us, to rise above our grief, we struggle for words, for thoughts that may get us through this dark day, but everything seems to be so inadequate. What plays again and again in my mind is this. Great enterprises require great risks. The men and women who died today knew that. They were the risk takers. They believed in the physical and intellectual challenge of space flight, and in that, they were an extension of all of us. We rode with them. They gave courage to even the most timid among us. Now, we share the grief of their friends and families. This shock will pass, of course, as great as it is. Their spirit will live on. Their adventurous ways will be picked up and carried on by others, and the frontiers of space and knowledge will be expanded. And finally, to those families, as we shared your pride, we share your sorrow. I'm Tom Brokaw. Good night from all of us at NBC News.
Right, and pulling off a huge upset tonight was Pleasant Plains. The Cardinals top Porta 69-62 to